This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to show number 614 of Coffee with Kenobi. This is your weekly spoiler-free place for Star Wars community and conversation. I'm your host, Dan Zehr, thrilled to be talking Star Wars with each and every one of you. Whether you're a fan of the movies, the Disney Plus shows, the animated features, the comic books, the novels, collectibles, or whatever you find yourself being drawn towards, a la the Death Star's tractor beam, this is the place for you. You can support Coffee with Kenobi by following the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok, and subscribing to the YouTube channel. Help spread the word by tweeting that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. I want to thank the official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi, MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. If you are interested in a no-cost, no-obligation quote for your next vacation, check out coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel and let them know Coffee with Kenobi and Dan Zehr sent you. On today's show, Mason Zehr and Nic Mongello join me to talk about the latest episode of Star Wars The Bad Batch. The episode is titled The Crossing. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about the 9th episode in Season 2 of The Bad Batch. The episode is titled The Crossing. So joining me are two guests. First is returning guest Mason Zehr. Mason, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
You bet. I'm looking forward to talking to you all about this. Behind the scenes, we have talked about it a lot already, but not that much because we save it for the show. Also joining us now, this next gentleman, he has been on several podcasts before, but he is a first-timer to Coffee with Kenobi. Please welcome to Coffee with Kenobi, Nic Mongello. Nic, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here, ready to talk about the episode.
Let's do it. So you and I planned this actually. We talked to Celebration, of course, and people may recognize your last name, but we won't hold that against you, who your dad is, but that's okay. We talked about this a lot at the D23 Expo. And I thought, this guy, I knew you were big on seeing the Bad Batch panel at Celebration, right?
Mm-hmm. I missed my dad's own panel to go to the Bad Batch panel, to cover it, obviously.
Yes, of course. So I know what Mason thinks about the Bad Batch, and people know what I think about the Bad Batch. But what do you think of the Bad Batch overall, and how would you rank it in as far as your Star Wars fandom goes?
So personally, I really liked the Bad Batch because, I obviously loved the Clone Wars so much, and it's just a great continuation of that story while also being different in the way that rather than focusing on a ton of different characters, the Bad Batch just focuses on a main group of our clones. And I just think it's a really great show. That's a great continuation of the Clone Wars story and just the story of the clones as a whole.
I love it. Well, very good. Well, we're going to start out the show just like we always do, where we're going to give one word to describe the episode and then just sort of give our overall reactions. Then we'll break it down a little more clearly. Mason, of course, we will start with you. What is one word to describe the crossing and sort of give your overall thoughts on it?
Backstabbing.
Backstabbing. Tell me why.
Because at the end, when Sid doesn't help them, and in the very beginning, when their ship gets stolen.
Very good. Yes, stolen. Yes. Okay. I like that you went there right away talking about Sid, and we're certainly going to talk about Sid. Nic, what about you? One word to describe the episode and your overall reactions to this one.
So one word I would use to describe this episode of The Bad Batch would honestly be recovering, because this episode has a lot of Omega and it's just the team as a whole recovering after Echo decided to leave the Bad Batch. So it's a lot of them talking about what the future is going to hold and just also recovering from losing their ship and being trapped in the mine. So I think that's the best way I would describe it.
Okay, very good. I would describe this episode as one word. I would just say revelatory. There's a lot of revelation here about loyalty, about friendship, and about really understanding what makes people tick, especially when it comes to Omega and tech. So we'll get into that. Nic, since this is your first time on Coffee with Kenobi, where do you want to start? We're not going to go necessarily linear when it comes to breaking this episode down, but what's a key point that you want to bring up that we can sort of dive into this thing?
So I think a great key point to start out the episode would be just to talk about some of like the good plot points. And I think one of the major ones is obviously their ship getting stolen. Like it's a massive part of the episode that shifts like exactly what they're going to do. It causes a lot of like problems within the group. They all kind of start to argue like who to blame about like whose fault it was and like what to do now. So I just think like I thought that was a really, really interesting way to take it, especially after losing Echo, like to add just kind of like more problems. And yeah.
So the ship thing is pretty important. I was thinking about this a lot when I watched the episode again. A lot of these ships, and the Marauder is the ship that we're talking about for the Bad Batch. When you're talking about some of these iconic ships in Star Wars, the first one that you think about is the Millennium Falcon. When Han Solo and Chewbacca take possession of the Falcon, The Force Awakens, Han Solo, of course, seamlessly says, Chewie, we're home. Right? And the Mandalorian Season 2 episode, The Tragedy, when Din Djarin's Razor Crest is blown to bits, then it was like he lost his home. What is it about these ships that make it like a home connection? Mason, what do you think?
I think because since they don't have like people would normally, they don't have homes. Mm-hmm. That's where they are most of the time, traveling the galaxy.
I agree with that. I think it's super symbolic too, because that is something they all share together. The Bad Batch at the end of the episode when Omega and Tech are talking, she talks about we're more than soldiers. We're more than a squad. We are family, and family is what permeates throughout this entire thing. And Nic, I'm not sure where you are. Actually, I'm just going to ask you, who's your favorite member of the Bad Batch?
My favorite member of the Bad Batch, I would probably say, I know he's not like a current member, but I just love Crosshair's story. Like, yes. I just love where they've taken him. But I'll do like my favorite current member.
Okay.
I think my favorite current member is probably Hunter. Just seeing him and how he treats Omega and how he leads the team and helps them recover from all these problems. I think he's my favorite of the current main group. But yeah.
I do love Hunter. I think my favorite is Omega, though. And I think while they both are central to the story, Omega very much takes center stage. Hunter has an interesting challenge here. Nic, so I'll just have you finish up with that. Hunter, he's a leader. He's also very much the lead paternal figure for Omega. But he has to keep everybody motivated, and he also has to respect Tech's feelings while showing him, Tech, you hurt Omega. She is hurting, and Tech can't figure out why. What do you make about that dynamic? Let's hear from Nic and then Mason.
So from that dynamic, I really think like that was a great thing that exemplified him as a paternal figure as well, because like that's something your dad would do. You'd be like, hey, like you hurt your sister's feelings, like you gotta go talk to her, you gotta like make up. Like I think that part of the episode especially really like exemplifies like his paternalness, especially after getting Omega, and shows how he's kind of like he's the dad of the group, like keeps everyone together. He's like, all right, kids, come on, like let's start moving these rocks out of the way. Let's get out of here. And yeah.
Mason, what do you think?
I think it's important how he doesn't like yell at him, but he keeps his temper low.
I agree. That's a really, really key part of leadership. Right now, there are some people that believe you have to yell to get your point across. Hunter doesn't do that. In fact, Hunter has grown a lot. He doesn't get super frustrated like you would. He doesn't appear to be anxious or nervous. He keeps his calm, and he says to Tech, you need to talk to her. But he doesn't explain specifically. He doesn't spell it out for Tech. In fact, I don't remember exactly. Do either of you remember what he said to him about why you need to talk to her, or is it even explained? I didn't write anything down for that.
Me neither. Oh my goodness. I can go fact check it though.
Well, that's okay. I've got the episode pulled up here. I think the important thing for this, though, is that Tech has to realize. I think let's break it down this way. Tech is not a Vulcan, right? To borrow from Star Trek, Tech is very logical. He's very practical. He is not governed at all by his emotions, and so are Vulcans in Star Trek. But I think the difference is that a Vulcan doesn't seem to find emotion as necessary per se. Now, I'm so a novice in Star Trek, so feel free to correct me, CWK listeners, if I'm completely off base, and I very well could be. But I think for Tech, and he does explain this at the end of the episode, and Mason, I know that this is something that you noticed as well. He says, I might process my feelings differently, but it doesn't mean I don't feel them. Did anyone write down the exact line for that one? I can always pull it up. But I really was moved by that. I think I was trying to figure out why this episode is called The Crossing. And I think it's a literal and it's also metaphorical. Do either of you have a theory about why it's called The Crossing?
I think because my word backstabbing.
Expand. Tell me what you mean by that, because I think you're onto something really cool.
Because of Sid.
Right. It's Sid. And what do you think The Crossing takes place?
It has a lot more story to be told.
Oh, look at you. I love it. Nick, what do you think? Why do you think it's called The Crossing?
So I think it's called The Crossing because there are a lot of different lines being crossed in terms of both physical things and mental things. Like obviously they're crossing across the canyon and then the wildebeest come in like in the Lion King and they have to scramble and try and get
If only
inside
Simba had a grappling hook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at least Simba didn't have to worry about the exploding material. So
the Ipsium, that's right.
Yeah, the Ipsium.
IPSIUM. I had to look that up.
Mm-hmm. But also it's a emotional crossing because obviously we're experiencing some Tech is having some emotion that we really haven't seen from him in the entire show. And they're all just kind of having to transition or cross this new challenge that's losing Echo because he was such a major part of the team. They just have to adapt to not having him around. So I think it's called The Crossing because of the emotional and the physical crossings that are done.
I agree. I think a lot of this is really metaphorical because the other episodes, the title's been really very on the nose about what the episode's about. But this one made me think a little bit more. They have to cross into unknown territory. They have to cross into a new way of living and thinking because they don't have their home. They don't have their ship. The Marauder is gone. And I think maybe most importantly, I think it's about the two lead characters. I think Omega has to cross into a level of understanding that, Crosshair and Echo made a choice. You have to cross over into a new way of thinking, and you have to accept that. Sometimes accepting the choices of others is a very, very hard thing to do. But that is also, by the way, why Echo appears to never be anxious about anything, even when he's in mortal, serious danger. Because anxiety is about trying to control things that you cannot. He realizes this is the choices that they made, so he takes a step back. But the crossing for Tech is he has to cross over into a new way of thinking that while I may not wear my emotions on my sleeve and do not let them govern me, I have to respect that Omega, who is family, this is really affecting her. And I feel like this makes a connection between them. And I feel like we've sort of seen throughout the season that Tech and Omega are slowly kind of sharing center stage a little bit. So that's a main thing of Omega and Tech. Mason? What's a big part about this episode that you would like to bring up?
It's not giant, but at the beginning when Hunter and Tech are just in the vault and Omega and Wrecker are watching, when she lifts up the rock, the side of it tilts up.
Yes. And why do you think that's important?
I don't know.
It's a cool visual. Nick, I see you smiling. What do you think?
No, I was just laughing at something. You can continue. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, don't be sorry at all. I feel like the whole rapport that the three of them have when they're trying to move all these massive boulders out of the way, I really like because they're frustrated with Wrecker. And I don't know category wise or how you even measure strength in Star Wars, because I don't, if you would do it if it were a role playing game, Dungeons and Dragons or the classic Star Wars role playing game or what have you. But I feel like if Hunter was mad enough, he could move a lot of those boulders a lot easier. So as irritated as he is, I think it's interesting that he shows a little bit of restraint. Now, he's never been someone who gets angry and goes crazy, except for when he had the chip in season 1. And that was a great episode. But that chip is long gone. Wrecker shows interesting restraint by also working to try to help out his friends. And I think that's a really, really cool thing. Let's go ahead and take a really quick break. I am Dan Zehr, and this is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
The thing I want to bring up in this, because of course I'm an English teacher, is I want to bring up the symbolism of water. So water in this episode, water in literature in general, usually means a change, a rebirth, a transformation. When someone or something goes into water or is submerged into water, they usually come out changed, different, or transformed. Of course, it is very much a Christian symbol for baptism. Now, in this episode, there's this great sequence where Omega finds this highly extra powerful Ipsium, and she uses this wonderful little drill that almost looks like something. It almost looks like a Guardians of the Galaxy ship or something that you would control if you were like on Toy Story Mania, although a much more sophisticated one, or like a really cool Nerf blaster.
Mm-hmm.
Nick, I'm assuming you've had a lot of Nerf blasters in your day.
Yeah, it kind of looked like to me like Star-Lord's gun, like the way you drill and then it'll like flip out the Ipsium like extractor. Like it was a really
I agree
cool
with. It's so cool. So when that happens, she's got one more to reach, and Mason said, "I wouldn't reach that last one," which I was glad to hear because I don't want you to fall. But fall she does, and I think what happens next. In fact, in the top 5 on Tuesday next week, it's going to be in my top 5. I'm going to call it a leap of faith. Tech sits there for like a second and he processes what has happened. And then he leaps after Omega. He has no idea if she's going to live or die. He has no idea what's going to happen. Is he going to hit the ground? Is he going to fall forever? Is there a creature? He has no idea, but he leaps without even doing any reluctant hesitation because he cares about her. And there's no logic in that. It's just raw emotion. I got to save my friend. And I think that is so important. And then when he hits that water with her, she goes to him and he grabs her and they resubmerge in safety. And they have their wonderful heart-to-heart later that I just talked about. But that, to me, that's a big symbol of the change that he goes through. And again, that's my English teacher hat talking.
I really, really like what you said about like I never knew that like water was like a major symbol for transformation, but like I completely see it now. And I'm like that moment when she's in the Ipsium mine and she's just so overcome with different emotions that she's like reaching for the other like crystals and she's going, then she slips and falls. Like it shows, like as you said before, Tech just expresses his emotions in different ways. And although a lot of people kind of see him as like an emotionless, just kind of like soldier or robot, like he does feel a lot of emotions and he does care for the people that are around him. He doesn't just see them as like numbers in his head. So like the way that he just was leaped after her and held her as they were going down those rapids and finally found safety, like shows that he really does care for everyone.
That's right. Absolutely. Well said. So we've talked about Omega and Tech, what I think are the two most important characters. And Mason, you brought up something really important at the beginning. I think your word was backstabbing. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
So talk about Sid. First, tell us what happens and what do you think is going on with Sid?
It's when they go to that
like an abandoned town or something?
The spaceport.
A spaceport. I think that's
the
what they call it.
abandoned spaceport.
Yes.
And Wrecker said we came here for nothing, but Tech says, no, we can do a long-term
communication. Yeah.
Communication with this. And so they do it, and they actually think they're going to get help. And then Sid says, I can't do it for you. And Hunter asks her, can you at least do something? She says, okay, give me a few days. And Hunter said, we don't have enough. What did he say?
Enough time.
Rations.
Food. Yeah, we're going to go hungry. Yeah.
To live that long, so it's kind of hard to think what's going on, but not a good sign.
And that, yeah, exactly. And then at first she's not going to help. And then Tech jumps up and he said, using emotion, using pathos, he says, what about that time I helped you? And I can't remember the name of the gangster. Or what about when we helped get rid of all of your debts? And then she goes, and then it still doesn't faze her. And she said, I didn't ask for like a checklist or something like that. And then say again?
I didn't ask for my life story.
Yeah, something like that. And then Omega looks at Sid at her hologram and says, Sid, and begs her. And Sid thinks about it and says, all right, give me a couple of days. And then she goes away. Well, that's not helpful. Backstabbing is a good word. Oh, what do we think about Sid, guys? I mean, Mason, you've already done a really great job of explaining that. Anything you want to add?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I thought you
kind of
covered
have
it well.
something to add.
Yeah, please do.
So I think that's a great moment that kind of shows Sid's true colors. Like, even after everything the Bad Batch did for her, like helping get rid of her debts, save her from the gangsters and the racing episode, like after everything, she just still kind of sees them as little hunters to go do her bidding. And she's just like, sucks to suck. Sorry. Like, have fun on that planet. I'll try my best, but I don't think I'll be able to do anything. Sorry. And then just hangs up. Like, it shows that like she might have cared a little bit, but not like a crazy amount.
Exactly. And I think this whole Ipsian thing is just another metaphor that is symbolic of the volatility of Sid and the fact that she is explosive and she cannot be trusted, right? You got to handle Ipsium with care. If you don't handle it and process it correctly, it could explode. It could cause your death. It's the same thing with Sid, really, isn't it? She's been fairly loyal to them. She's kept them protected. She's fed them, but she's also taken advantage of their very unique skill sets. And she has prospered from it as well. But she doesn't seem to have a big sense of loyalty. She's like Kevin Durant. She has no particular sense of loyalty. It doesn't seem that way. If they have 3 days and hardly any rations and they're going to be hungry, that's just not good enough. So the crossing for them, I hope, is that they will see, why are we still with Sid? Echo figured it out. Crosshair has nothing to do with this because he doesn't even know who Sid is, as far as I'm aware of. But the fact that she continues to do this, I hope they cross over into a new way of thinking. Because as you said at the top of the show, Mason, Sid does not seem to be trusted. I mean, if I were in danger, if I were in trouble, I would certainly not expect Sid to bail me out because I don't think that she would.
She has no like emotional feeling towards the Bad Batch. Like, she doesn't see them as friends or family, even after everything that's happened. She just kind of sees them as like little hunters to go get her Ipsium and go do her stuff. And even when they're stranded out there, she's just kind of like, okay, I can get someone else to do something for me. Goodbye. And then like hangs up.
It's like they're assets for her instead of
That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, thank you. It's like they're forgetting, like you said, like you both said, the family aspect of this. Are there any other key moments from the episode? I mean, we did mention the Marauder was stolen. We don't know who stole it. But this is an actual, a bit of a cliffhanger. It doesn't end on a suspenseful moment per se, although they are trapped on this planet. But it does end in a place where we're not going to see what's going to happen until next week. Last week we were spoiled with getting the two-parter released together, but now we've got the end of this, and we don't know how they're going to get off this planet. I mean, I'm assuming that they will. Otherwise, this would be not much of a second season. But is there anything that we didn't bring up that either of you want to talk about before we give our final grade?
When you said Sid's like Kevin Durant, it's like the Nets trying to put James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant on the same team.
That's right. It doesn't work out. Yeah, Sid is like the Kyrie Irving. We're making some major NBA references here, so hopefully people
5-6 weeks. Good job. Next week, goodbye.
That's great. Tony Kornheiser would be proud of that. Nick, anything you want to bring up as we wrap up the discussion of the episode?
Anything you want to bring up? I think that I'm good. I think we brought up all the points that I really wanted to make.
Ipsium, I don't believe has ever been used in Star Wars that I can remember. Maybe it's been in a book or in a deep cut in a comic, but I don't believe Ipsium has ever been used. But it's very volatile. I think it's interesting that it's blue, and then when you harvest it, it turns into yellow. I am relieved on a personal note. I don't know, it's not personal, but on a side note, I'm relieved it wasn't kyber crystals, because that would open up a whole other world. And I think Gungi is the only Jedi that we've really seen in this series anyway. And I hope they kind of keep it that way, because seeing how these characters grow and interact and try to find their place in the galaxy is fascinating to me. All right, Mace.
Sorry. I love that the story, as you said, like there hasn't been a lot of Jedi. Like I just love that the story is more about the clones themselves and not just about the Jedi and the Sith. Like it's about the soldiers that fought these wars and did what needed to be done. And now we see the repercussions of what happened.
Absolutely.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is... yes.
Well, Nick, if you'd like, why don't you start first? Give us your letter grade for the episode, and then feel free to sort of explain your rubric.
So for me, I think that this episode's a solid A. Like this episode had a lot of it might have been a simple episode. You know, you're trapped in the mines. You're just trying to get out of this town. Your ship was stolen, but it's so much deeper than that, especially with like the metaphors with the Ipsium and everyone and Sid and the backstabbing and just the emotions that were at play with Echo and Tech and everyone in the group. I just think it was like a great episode for the characters themselves.
All right. I love it. Mason, what about you?
I give this an A, not an A+, because it's not as good as the Super Bowl, which was an A+.
Do you want to explain anything about your grade, or you just want to leave it at that?
Leave it at that.
Okay. I will give the episode a B+. A B+ is very, very good. It's about as high of a B+ as you can get before you get into the A- range, simply because I feel like last week's were A+ episodes, and they're not the same level. I mean, it doesn't all have to be the same scope. They don't all have to have special appearances by Rex and Palpatine. In fact, if they did all the time, it wouldn't be as special. This one is character-wise, this one's an A+, especially because of the relationship between Omega and Tech kind of, I wouldn't say letting his guard down, but just being more vulnerable and willing to be vulnerable openly. This whole episode is about 3 different types of conflict. Conflict are the opposing forces that interrupt the character. You've got the classic terminology, man versus man, which would be like Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader. You've got a man versus nature would be like the Bad Batch trying to survive in this cave, or trying to survive without food or water, or the elements in these wildebeest thingies showing up. Or man versus self, which would be Tech trying to decide, how vulnerable do I want to be? How do I help Omega and still be who I am? And I feel like it does a nice little cocktail of all of them, which I really, really appreciate. At the end of the day, it's just a one-parter, and as good as it was, I'm just going to give it a B+, which again is quite solid.
I didn't realize we were doing like plus and minus grading, so I would actually put mine closer to like the A- range. So
okay. Hey, you are allowed, as an educator, Nick, you are allowed to modify your grade any way you like, my friend.
You just had to deduct some points.
Yes, there you go. I love it. Well, I almost called you Patrick, and you're my son. Mason and Nick, thank you both so much for joining me this week to talk about The Crossing, episode 9 of season 2 of Star Wars: The Bad Batch. Nick, you were awesome, buddy. I knew you would be. I've been looking forward to having you on the show since we talked at the D23 Expo. You're welcome to come back anytime,
I would be,
my friend.
So happy to come back. I had a great time. Thank you so much for having me. Like, it was a pleasure, truly.
Absolutely. The pleasure was all ours. And Mason, thanks, buddy. You again to be awesome as I expect. And I want to thank everybody for your kind messages and notes and texts about Mason's work on Coffee with Kenobi. Mason's doing a great job. And I mean, before you know it, it'll be Coffee with Kenobi with Mason Zehr, and I'll be at the podcasting retirement home.
But hopefully you don't call me Patrick.
I won't. He put his name as Patrick Mahomes because we're still very excited about Kansas City. Well, hey, Thank you again so much, everybody. Be sure to get your top 5 list ready for next Tuesday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time for CWK Live. You can share your top 5 moments from this episode of The Bad Batch. Again, the episode is called The Crossing. Have a wonderful rest of your week, everybody. And remember, this is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.